Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Now, those of you who know me will know I'm not really that interested in a lot of modern cars. I'm not big into touchscreens, I'm not big into massive safety assists, and I'm just not big into the way that cars feel so more disconnected by the fact that they distract us compared to the cars of years ago, and not even that far ago. So it may beg the question as to why I, a proper petrolhead through and through, have purchased not only a brand new car, but an electric one. Well, you see, to me, when it comes to cars, I'm not just into the engines, I'm into everything about them. And I'm also a bit of an electronics nerd as well. So I've always kind of been fascinated by the idea of battery-driven propulsion. But there hasn't really been many battery-driven propulsed cars that are either in my budget or ones that I would consider actually owning. But today we are driving my 2025 Dacia Spring Expression 65 horsepower model in a lovely fetching shade of white that I bought brand new. Now, I picked this car up exactly 3 months to the day of filming this video. I purchased the car from John Banks Renault and Dacia in Colchester, and I have to say they made the process really nice, simple and easy, and they even let me film the clips that you can see on the screen right now in their showroom. Now, nobody from Dacia or John Banks have paid me any money or sponsored this video in any way and told me to say nice things about the car or the dealer itself, but I just wanted to put it out there that they were nice to deal with, and so was my salesperson Sky. Now, my previous daily driver to this was a 2002 Volkswagen Golf 1.9 TDI, and as good a car that was, I was realising that I didn't do the mileage to justify actually daily driving a diesel. My commute to my work and back is about 2 miles at most each way, and the car in the winter especially was just not getting warm, and it was doing about 40 odd miles per gallon, so it wasn't even being that efficient compared to what it could do on a run. Now, for those of you that follow the Radiator Arms podcast, which involves myself, James and Ant, who are all co-hosts on this channel, you will know that I had been quite intrigued by the idea of the tiny little Dacia Spring, because my first car was a Peugeot 106, and that was a tiny little city economy box. And I have to say, there are joys to be had about a car that is that small, that is easy to park, easy to drive, cheap to run when it comes to modern times and modern traffic. So one of my reasons of being so interested in the Dacia Spring was that it just looked like such a good bit of value for an electric car, especially at the price they started at. This car cost me just over £13,200, or actually what it's costing me is £170 a month with no deposit whatsoever. So when in 2024 Dacia announced that the Spring would be coming to the UK market, I was intrigued because I'd always kind of thought about trying electric. It isn't something I'd had any experience with, but I looked about the amount of mileage I actually do per week and the amount of mileage I do on my average trips and realised, do you know what? I think one of these will fit quite nicely into my life. So let's talk a bit about the car itself. Now, the Dacia Spring is a Chinese-made vehicle based on the Renault Kwid platform, which I believe was an Indian market car, an originally internal combustion one, and it has been converted to electric. Now, the vehicle has a 26.5 kilowatt-hour battery, 65 horsepower, and I actually do have a form of DC charging on this as well, should I want to do it. It's only about 30 kilowatts, so it's not massively rapid, but it will take your battery charge from about 20 to, I think, 100% or 0 to 80 in about 45 minutes. And the same thing on a normal 7 kilowatt charger. You'll be able to top this vehicle up to about 100% in just about 2.5–3 hours from my experience, from about 20% or so, which means actually it doesn't take too long to charge. You could also charge one of these vehicles overnight on a granny charger, as they call it, and it'll take between about 8 and 10 hours. Real world range in the summer, I would say you get about 120 to 130 miles. And in the winter right now, I'm probably getting between 80 and 100 miles out of the battery pack. Now, considering at my unit, I I can charge it pretty much when I'm going about the day, and I go up to my unit 5 days a week. I'm doing pretty well. I put it on charge maybe once, maybe twice a week, and that gives me more than enough energy for all the trips I need to do. Now, most of the trips I need to do are within a 5 to 10 mile radius of my home or my work unit. And actually, I barely use that much battery at all on a day-to-day basis. But if I do want to go somewhere further afield, and half an hour or an hour drive somewhere, I can do that. And I don't actually have to really worry about it. It's amazing for the kind of daily driving I do that I just don't really get range anxiety in this car. Now let's talk about the specification that I've actually gone for on this vehicle. The expression spec that I have is proper back to basics. And do you know what? That is something I have been missing in motoring. The other vehicle that I have, as most people who follow the channel will know, is a beautiful 1995 Mercedes C124 Coupe. And it's wonderful. It's old school luxury. There's not a single LED light on it. There are no touch screens. There's nothing to distract you. You just get into the car, you sink into that leather, you put it in drive, and you just go, and you can cruise long distances without distractions. And you know what? This car has no real distractions. Now, there's no central screen in this vehicle whatsoever. The radio is controlled by dials on the steering wheel, and you have no sat nav, you have no touch screen, you have no Apple CarPlay, you've got 2 speakers up front, which sound all right, but you've got digital radio, you've got Bluetooth, you've got AM and FM, and that's really it from the multimedia side of things. What more does anybody actually need? Now, one thing I like about this is that there is no app whatsoever, because there is no form of connected services in a car which doesn't have a touchscreen or doesn't have any form of onboard computer like that. So while you can't preheat the base model, it doesn't matter, because my theory is in 10 to 20 years, if this car is still about, it won't have had a media center that has gone bad, and it won't have had an app that has stopped getting support or connected services that won't work anymore. Now, it's quite funny because I've got front electric windows, but I have rear wind-up windows, and I have manual mirrors. Yes, the car just about has central locking, and what's amazing is there's no push to start, there's no keyless go, there's nothing like that. You have a real key and an ignition barrel and a real handbrake, which is something I adore in an age where we're all forced to have electric handbrakes, and they tend to break and they tend to fail. So in theory, there is probably less to go wrong on this car than you'd actually really think. Oh, let's put some of this horsepower to test. We're coming out of junction now, and whee! Okay, that's up to 30. Now, what's interesting performance-wise about this is some of you may go, oh my goodness, 65 horsepower? That is not enough. Well, this is the GTI Spring, I'll have you know, because the entry-level Springs have 45 horsepower, and that is a claim 0 to 60 of about 20 seconds. I think this is about 30 or 40 seconds to 60, but it doesn't really feel that slow ever. Now, one thing about this powertrain is the 0 to 30-ish. Now, that is actually amazingly nippy. Because this car is so small and so light, I think it's something like 3 or 4 seconds to 30 or something like that. But it basically means that round town, pulling out of junctions and just getting yourself out of the way of things, actually, it's more than fine. It's really adequate, and it feels better than my Golf did. Now, I'm coming into a 60 here. We're doing 40 miles an hour, and let's press it up to 60, that is 45, 50, 55, 60. And there you go, you're up to speed. Yes, it's not gonna kind of push you back into the seat, and you're not gonna be wowed by the performance, but I must say that it's adequate, especially when you've only got a couple people in the car. Now, this vehicle does have a top speed of about 80 miles an hour, which is fine. And it means for average cruising and even going on dual carriageways, which I have done, you can keep up with traffic. You can enter a slip road and you can get up to speed and you'll have no problems. And you know, it was one of those things where when I heard the horsepower figures, I thought it was going to be slow. I thought it might be a bit undrivable. But as I said, because of that instant low down torque, the way that 0 to 30 is tuned, and the fact the car is so light, I'm not in need of any extra performance. And this is coming from somebody who has now driven some very fast stuff. We're talking about 730 horsepower Ferraris. We're talking about V8 gated manual Audi R8s, Ferrari 550s with V12s and 6-speed manuals, which just throw you back into the seat. But for daily driving use, it's fine. Now, it is funny. Cars like this don't really have road presence. They have what I like to call road hilarity. Because it is so narrow, just looks funny going down the road. The looks on this are subjective. Some people might not like it, but I really like it. It's kind of chunky, a little bit high up when you drive it into corners because it's got so much suspension travel and you've got no bolstering. It leans and rolls. But I'm having fun. There's something about a back-to-basic car which has no real mod cons or frills that is really enjoyable to drive. Now, there are, of course, some modern safety systems you have to have, which is lane assist and lane departure warning and active braking. But there is a button on the center console which you can press when you get in the car, and if you press it twice, all of that goes off. You're back to just you and your basic traction control. And it's one of the best buttons in the car because it turns off all the beeps that you have when you're driving through areas where there are speed limit signs, which it really doesn't get right. Sometimes you'll be driving somewhere and a 30 sign has just turned up, but it's in a 10 sign or it's in a 60 sign. So I just tend to ignore that and think of it as one of the many quirks. It doesn't just plague this car, but plagues a lot of cars with those modern speed limit recognition signs. Now, reliability-wise, it's an interesting one because it is a Chinese-made vehicle, and there certainly was back in the day a big stigma about Chinese-made vehicles being rubbish and being unreliable and being the kind of thing you wanted to avoid. But one of the reasons I bought this vehicle is it's backed by the Dacia/Renault dealer network. But let's be honest, how does a 13 grand brand new electric car feel quality-wise? Now, of course, this is a vehicle you're not going to want to use on particularly longer trips, although you can use it on longer trips because of the DC charging on this particular spec. You know, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It's not too bad, but obviously I'm 6'4" and my seat is all the way back, and you can see my head is quite close to the headlining here, and that means that you do get a little bit of driver fatigue on longer journeys. About an hour, hour and a half at a time is about the most I'd want to spend in this, but that doesn't mean I'm particularly uncomfortable most of the time. Yes, the seats aren't that supportive, but they're good enough for what the car's intended purpose is. Now, we've touched on the fact that the interior isn't like the most comfortable place for long journeys, but actually it's screwed together really quite well. And I have to say, I've got no squeaks or rattles, nothing is falling off, nothing is breaking. You may notice that that rear brake light cover is not attached at the moment. That's because I might have broken that while pulling that off to look at the bulb, and I need to fix that at some point. Yeah, but that's not the car's fault, that's my fault. So if you're seeing lots of light coming from the rear, back around where my hand is, that is why. But the cheapness of the car, to me, is some of its charm. Yes, I don't have heated seats or steering wheel, and yes, the steering wheel actually looks hilariously a little bit Austin Allegro-y, because it is almost flattened off at the top, which is highly amusing. It's got a single pantograph wiper. It's got a single washer nozzle because it's so narrow. Now, driving dynamics-wise, even though I do have fun with it, it teeters the line of what I like to call acceptable / a bit crap. Just a bit like that. It's on the acceptable side of crap in places. Yes, it's acceptable enough, but if you go over speed bumps with enough gusto or bumps in the road and undulations, you can find that the rear end of the car almost wants to lift up and kind of crash back down to the ground. Now, some of that is probably going to be due to the wheelbase because it is very, very narrow. But also I think it's just the suspension tuning isn't really that brilliant, and they are using kind of bottom rate parts in that regard. But some of that wallowiness does mean the ride is actually pretty comfortable. This is genuinely one of the most comfortable cars I have owned ride-wise, or at least it was after I replaced the tyres the car came on. Now, cheaping out in some ways is understandable from a manufacturer on a base price car. But the tyres this came on were a set of Linglongs. Yes, that is their name. I'm not being racially insensitive. They are genuinely called Linglong tyres, and they are some of the worst tyres I've ever felt. Not only were the sidewalls so floppy and so soft, but the actual eco-ness of the tyres meant there was just no grip. You'd go into corners and you'd have absolutely no confidence whatsoever. It's the only car I've ever driven where you'd start to turn the steering wheel and the car would still plough on almost straight. And if it was wet, forget it. You were understeering at 20 miles an hour in basic bits. It was horrifying. Now that has been a bone of contention for many people on the Spring owners groups. You look on Facebook and you look at the reviews as well that people have done on the car. And I think a lot of the way that people have talked about how the car handles and found it unsettled and found it to not be the best round corners were all to do with that Linglong set of tyres. Because I've put some Continental tyres on here, and my goodness, it has transformed this car. You can actually have a little bit of a play with the car now, and you can feel the rear end rotating in a little bit, and you can actually make use of some of that basic chassis. And you do find that now it's got those bedded tyres on it, even though they're skinny, they're 165, I think either 55 or 65 section 15s, and I've still got enough grip for how light the car is. Now those tyres did amuse me at first when you're in the dry and they're squealing and you're going round roundabouts on the bleeding edge at 20 miles an hour, and there was some amusement in that. But when it comes to safety, when it comes to the fact that I spend a lot of time driving on back roads, it was just unacceptable. And in the wet and the British weather, now I almost rear-ended somebody on the first day I had the car because I went to do an emergency stop and it just ploughed forward. I haven't had that problem since I've changed these tyres. And that is something I've actually fed back to Dacia and to the dealership, is that the tyres that come on the car shouldn't be on there. And furthermore, to the safety aspect of things, there is currently a recall for the steering rack, because on a select few amounts of models, there is a steering rack issue where they're basically made out of chocolate, and I think if you hit a pothole or you hit something, it can break and you can lose all steering and you can have a really bad time, yeah. But apparently that's only a really short run of cars on a production line from a part from another manufacturer that they don't know, or another supplier, and that has been fixed, and they're now recalling about 800 odd cars, even though I think 16 or so were affected. So to be fair to Dacia, they're doing their due diligence. It could happen with any manufacturer, but you know, take that however you want to take that. There is one other thing that does have to be said about this car. It's a 1-star crash rated car. Let's be honest with you, the safety rating on the pre-facelift model of this, which was sold in Europe and we didn't see in the UK, was 1 star. And that is mainly due to a lack of, you know, safety aids and all the extra bits and bobs like that. But, you know, the cabin intrusion, there was a little bit there which makes you go, eh. And they had beefed this car up from when it was an Indian or Chinese only market vehicle, and they had added structure and supports. But when they facelifted this for the new front end and all the new electrics in 2024, they didn't retest it with Euro NCAP, and they're apparently not retesting it till 2027. And that probably speaks volumes about the fact that it may not have actually improved at all. But for me, it's a risk I'm willing to take. And also, one of the things about this car is, as we can see this Mini coming up here, almost in the middle of the road, is you're probably less likely to have an accident just because of the width. Now, one thing that I suffer with on these roads like this is lorries coming towards me and 4x4s coming towards me right in the middle of the road. And basically meaning that if you're anything wider than this, you're going to be having what I like to call a squeaky bum moment very often. But in this, I just push it up to the side of the road like I'm doing now, and I have got plenty of space to get out of the way of oncoming vehicles and people who are texting and being silly. So the likelihood of me having an accident is probably less anyway, so I trade it off with that. That narrowness also means round town, my goodness. This is just one of the most pleasant vehicles I've ever owned for general day-to-day stuff. Going to the shops, nipping in and out of traffic, and just being able to scoot through things. I drove in Cambridge recently, and that is notoriously quite a bit of a tight, difficult place to deal with, and there are cyclists everywhere who don't seem to have any form of life self-preservation, and this was just able to get out the way, get round things calmly, and keep me safe, and keep me out of harm's way by the fact that it is so small. Now let's focus a little bit more on the electric side of things. How have I actually found daily driving an electric powertrain vehicle? Well, I tell you what, I've enjoyed it. It's quite quiet in here, which means on days when you're sneaking out of the driveway at about 6 or 7 in the morning, you're not starting the engine, you're not waking any neighbours up, you can just smoothly move on. And it also means that, you know, if you've had a particularly long day and you're tired and maybe your ears are a bit overwhelmed and you're just feeling like your senses have taken a battering, you get into something like this, and the loudest thing is the wind noise and the noise from the tyres, which is still quieter than any internal combustion car. Now, can I recommend that you buy one of these cars? Well, at the moment, I would say hold off a little bit, because in early next year there's going to be a refresh with 2 different horsepower outputs. There's going to be a 70 and a 100 horsepower output, and a battery with different technology in it as well, which means you'll get a little bit more mileage for a slightly smaller battery apparently. And that's amazing, because these cars are pretty efficient. In the summertime, I was getting about 5-ish miles per kilowatt hour. And now in the winter, I'm getting around 4 to 4.1, which I have to say is pretty dang efficient for a small car like this. And I've got the heaters cranked right now. I must say the heaters aren't that brilliant, because I don't know what they've done. It's a resistive heater setup. There's no heat pumps in this, but they just don't get that hot. Yes, I'm warm enough in here, but I'm never at the point where I'm like really quite warm. So some of you may find that a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, it is what it is. It's still warmer than some previous vehicles I've had, and it still gets much warmer than my Golf ever did on my commute to work and back. So this is my 3-month update and kind of mini review on this car. And I think the question I really have to answer is, am I happy with this purchase? Or should I have just stuck with a conventional internal combustion vehicle? Now, as I've mentioned, for the amount of mileage I do, for the fact that I've got somewhere I can charge it very easily and it doesn't take that long to charge, the fact that it's so cheap to run and so efficient, this cost me about £4.5 to £5 per charge for about 120 miles. And that's not even on the cheapest rate. We've got no night electricity. That's about 30 pence per kilowatt. And it is still half the cost, maybe even a third of the cost of my Golf diesel was to run during the short trips. And this is what I mean about people coming in the middle of the road there. Oh, drivers these days, they just get right on my nerves. But yes, the cheapness and the efficiency has been a massive thing for me with this. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy I made the decision to purchase this car. Now, at a year's time, or in 2 years' time, I have the opportunity in the PCP contract to just return it and you know, cut my losses and just go, yeah, I'm gonna get another car. I've treated it like a lease car. Will I still want to own the car, or will I return it? I don't know, but I have to say, I am really quite attached to this little thing. And I know it's not gonna be for everybody. You know, the range might be too little for some. It might be too small. It might look too ridiculous, or it might not have enough space. And I understand that, but as far as I'm concerned, I've purchased the right kind of vehicle for me, and I really do enjoy it. And hopefully there's going to be a few more videos on the car on the channel soon, and I believe James is going to take it out for a drive and give his full review, and I'm hoping that Dacia might be nice and might send us one of the new models with the higher horsepower motor, and maybe some of the new tech and the things on it with the update, just to see how we get on. And if anybody from Dacia is listening who can make that happen for us, please send us an email to talk@jayemm.com. We would love to kind of put this head to head and see if the newer updated versions improve it or not, and if they make a difference, or if maybe people should be looking to the used market for a bargain on one of these cars. But from me, as I scoot past this lorry on this very narrow road, quite smugly in my tiny little car, I want to say thank you for watching the video, and don't forget to listen to our podcast, The Radiator Arms, which goes live on this very channel every Monday at 7 AM, followed a week later on streaming services, podcast platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, etc., etc. And I will see you in the next video.